Hello, everyone. I was thinking maybe a good way to get us started is I'll just let you, each of you introduce yourself. Tell us all a little bit about the company that you work for and your role there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Candice Shea. I'm the CEO and co-founder for VO. VO, we provide scooter and bike share services to cities across the U.S. And right now we deploy in more than 50 cities under our portfolio. And we specialize in providing long-term sustainable program, partnering with cities, and also providing the diverse portfolio of vehicle type that our users love. Hi, my name is Gabrielle Kerr. I am the marketing manager for Emnify. Emnify is the first global cloud-native IoT connectivity provider. Emnify offers our Emnify IoT Super Network, which is a cloud-native distributed network with regional data breakouts across the globe. So we have relationships with over 540 network carriers, and we cover regions over 180 countries. So ultimately, what we do is we enable businesses to stay connected wherever they are, specifically in the micromobility industry, and we keep their data both secure and manage their devices on our platform. So pass it to you.
Hello, everyone. This is Yan Shi. I'm the manufacturer from Navi. We produce micromobility products for e-scooter and e-bike. We serve many top operators for the micromobility industries. So that's basically what we do.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Brett Muller, head of public policy for Spin. Like Candice, VIO, we're also a shared micromobility operator in about 60, 70 cities, 30 universities across the US. Yeah, for those who don't know Spin, I would say there are a lot of similarities between the blue, green, orange scooters. What sets Spin apart is I think historically we've been more focused on compliance from the start and also having a more equity-focused service.
Thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate that sort of intro. And I was thinking maybe the way to get us started here is just talk, if you could maybe talk, each of you, a little bit about kind of what you see as the future of micromobility. As a bit of context, I'll offer that, we've seen ridership bounce back to the pre-COVID levels. I think this is largely because of an expansion of micromobility operations. And I guess I'm thinking mostly about sort of shared micromobility. I believe there's a report by the American Bike Share and Scooter Share Association saying that ridership is right back to where it was before COVID, with some about 289,000 micromobility devices on streets. So maybe I'll start with Britt. Sort of give us a little bit of what you guys are seeing as trends in micromobility and the future with in the case of Spin and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll speak a little bit more narrowly on what I see as far as like some regulatory changes. I would say the last 5 years, if I had to sum it up, the focus for operators has been to grow and expand across the U.S., even globally. And for our city partners, the focus has really been about developing accountability metrics, ways to oversee this program and address a lot of the public concerns that have come up. The next few years, where I see sort of the regulatory evolution shifting towards is more about viability for both operators and cities. And by that, I mean shifting the focus to performance-based incentives and ways to encourage operators to meet city goals in a way that allows operators to run a more viable business.
Sure.
And I would say that wasn't really the focus the last 5 years because VC money, a lot of investment sort of subsidized the cost of operations. Going forward, I think we're going to have to work with our city partners to find a new path.
Certainly cities are becoming more involved.
Yeah.
And it's their streets, their sidewalks, and they see that they should be much more involved and at the table when it comes to micromobility. Yen, any thoughts? What are your thoughts about the future of this industry and how sort of and your role or your company's role in it?
Well, we see that there's a shift from the orders of e-scooter to a little bit towards e-bike. People are getting used to a shared mobility, but maybe with a consideration of a longer distance. But they are looking for a different way to travel. With current environment, I think because the basic infrastructure of public transportation is still lacking in a few cities. So this still a good options to improve a form of micromobility. From a manufacturer point of view, we think that regardless of e-scooter or e-bike, as long as the expansion plan is there, we are always there to support.
Sure.
So I think we still do see a great incremental improvement in the future.
Sounds good. And I'll go to you, Gabrielle.
Yeah, so for us, I think that the future is very promising in the micromobility space. As an IoT connectivity provider, we see many businesses that are looking to go more global rather than staying siloed in a specific region or area. So that's where a provider like us can come in and give them that global support so that they can really scale their micromobility business. So I'll start from the city perspective. In the first couple years, it's more like trial and error phase for cities. And more recently, with the accountability metrics, I think cities also are more committed to micromobility program to be a part of the landscape of transportation. So more longer term contracts are being contracted with limited vendor, which is great. And then they also focus on how we can partner with the city to roll out more reasonable regulation and fee structure, which can enable us to survive in the long term. From the company standpoint, I think as an industry, the most important goal for us is to grow the industry together, which is also grow the ridership, because at the end of the day, the rider win, the city win, we win. And we all can be in this forever. So one thing I think a lot of us, especially Vio, we're trying to do is how we can roll out the device type that is actually cater for the user's needs even better going forward.
That's interesting. Yeah, the idea of the form factor and how that can be, how that might change, and better serve the rider. And I'm going to stay on a little bit on that theme, Candace, and maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the challenge that the industry is facing. Is it infrastructure or lack of infrastructure? Is it rising cost? Is it ridership? How do you get more riders interested? What do you see as some of the challenges, I suppose?
That's a great question. I would say the number one support micromobility as the industry needs is really the infrastructure upgrades. So a lot of us will see this as a trade-off for public space of use, but I think this is more urgent equity issue. So I think the first group to be addressed is actually people who live in underserved community. So in a lot of programs we are in, vendors like us, we are incentivized to go to underserved community by transit. So we actually offer very huge discounts for people to get access to the program easily. But the truth is that we find out a lot of members in the underserved community don't use it is because the neighborhood is also underserved by the infrastructure. The second group we're seeing as an equity issue is people with disability. So a lot of programs right now, the parking is actually on the street. So in order to provide and protect the people with disability, we do see the need to provide more protected bike lane and also on-street parking. So like 73% of our users we surveyed say, I actually won't want to use the sidewalk if I get access to the protected bike lane. The only reason why I use the pedestrian sideways because I don't want to ride along with those high-speed traffic, which is super dangerous. So protected bike lane is one solution. The other solution we're seeing is on-street parking, because on-street parking enable people to start and end your trip not like going onto the sidewalk. And we actually have been piloting that solution very successfully with a lot of cities right now. And we do see the reduction in the collision with the pedestrian and also increase the safety level of the program as a whole.
I see. Interesting. So infrastructure is always, and I hear that very often. Thank you. And Gabrielle, from your vantage point, what do you see as some of the challenges facing the industry?
I would agree with Candace. Public infrastructure is huge. I think that when I look at my day-to-day example, and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so it's a city that's growing. We're not necessarily like a Detroit, but we're growing. And we have micromobility devices around the city. But again, we're forced to use the sidewalk. We don't have those bike lanes. And unfortunately, what happens is the actual people in the city are banning it in front of their businesses for scooters to ride on the sidewalk because they don't want it to block traffic going into their business. So again, infrastructure is huge. I completely agree. And as well as when you connect the dots to what I do with connectivity, the infrastructure is important because what we need to do is make sure that they are connected and interconnected within the city. So the more public infrastructure support that we have, the city can enable then the devices and the users with the connectivity, connecting to smart traffic cams or smart buildings and so forth. So I would agree with mostly what Candace said as well.
Sure. And Yin, I kind of think that you're coming almost more from a technology vantage point. Are there some challenges you see in that regard?
Yeah, well, from a manufacturer perspective, I think looking at infrastructure is such a big topic. And we don't really have a control on the infrastructure because that's related to a lot of government agency. What we focus on is looking into a perspective from the operator. How are we going to reduce the operating costs? So we look on a few perspectives of the operating costs.
Right.
For one, we will focus on wear and tear. So let's say the product has a lot of wear and tear. What are they going to do within the next 5 years? Is the spare part going to be compatible with other parts? Or can they order the part on time? Can we ship the part within 3 months for them to do a replacement? We hate, excuse me, we hate to see inactive vehicles. Sure, right? We want to see all the vehicle on the road. If not, at least stand by, right? Secondly, is for the AI supports. We currently have some kind of AI module where you can add on different scooter. From the AI module, you can detect the pedestrian. Right. You can check on the parking spot. Maybe that's related to the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then you can also do on the sidewalk detection, where you can check different road viability of different road in conjunction with geofences supports. And lastly, I would say it's all about the protection of the vehicle as well. I think the protection of the shared vehicle is as important as protection of pedestrian, because it's also, again, related to inactive shared e-scooter, right? So what we do with the protection is we try to improve on the waterproof level of the e-scooter.
Sure.
Or we are trying to improve on the ease to break of the parts, enhancement of the parts, and so on and so forth. So those are the small details that we look into in order to support these parts.
Yeah, this is hardware, and it has to survive on a city street in no small way. Yeah. And Britt, any thoughts from you about what you see as challenges? We've talked about infrastructure and some of those things. What have we left out?
Well, absolutely, infrastructure is the basis. I lived in Copenhagen for several years, and there's a reason everybody's riding bikes from kids to grandmas. So that makes a big difference. I think one thing that I've noticed over the last few years is the cost of the service has increased 2-3 times.
That's right.
I think in San Francisco, for example, we may have started pricing at under 20 cents a minute. Today it's 50 cents a minute.
Right.
And so we have to ask why. What is causing that type of price increase, which is way above inflation? I think there are a few reasons. On the operator side, we have less access to capital,
Sure.
which are previously would subsidize the cost of the rides. From like a policy or regulatory point of view, the expectations from operators has increased. All these accountability metrics serve a good purpose, but when they raise expectations and we need to hire more in-house staff, pay them better, the cost of the service goes up. And so when I think about how do we get ridership up, how do we put our companies in a better position to serve riders, we have to make trips more affordable. And
Gotcha.
yeah, for me, coming from a policy point of view, we have to work with cities to find ways to offset our program fees, because micromobility is not a subsidized industry. Historically, we have paid fees for the right to operate, which in some cities maybe cover the full cost of administration, and others maybe they don't.
Right.
But I think if we want to keep micromobility affordable, we have to work with cities to reduce our overhead.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point to make. And we heard one of the speakers at a previous panel uh, make the argument that shared micromobility should be a fully subsidized form of transportation in cities and by cities. And as I'm often reminded that transportation does not make money. That's not the purpose of it. And even though in many respects it does, I think of the airlines, but nonetheless, when we're talking about urban transportation, many of those systems, public transit and that sort of thing, is not in the business of making money. So, Britt, Spin has been involved in some programs or some initiatives to expand access to micromobility in a number of cities. I think of the Spin Access Program in Pittsburgh. All of these things come with some buy-in by cities, some form of subsidy. Could you talk a little bit about that? How much does it take, or is what sort of direction what sort of direction would you like to give to cities as they consider a subsidy for micromobility as a way to expand transportation equity in their neighborhoods?
Yeah, it's a big question. I'll give a few examples.
Okay.
Because it's not always like a direct subsidy that we need.
Okay.
So for Pittsburgh, for example, we have a generous equity program where we offer free rides to low-income riders in Pittsburgh. That is made possible by the city deciding to choose one operator. You don't have 3 or 4 companies offering their services. You essentially give us an exclusive in the market.
Sure.
And that allows us to offer a very generous low-income pricing program. So that's one form of subsidy, is like reducing the number of operators.
Yeah.
And I'd say like across the country, we've seen cities move from 4, 5 unlimited numbers of operators to more often 2 to 3. And in college towns, just 1. That's the right trend. We want to see that continue. So that's super helpful. One other example I'll give you is in DC. They also have prioritized equity, and they've enabled operators to sort of put their money where their mouth is there by offering a effective rebate based on the percentage of trips that are taken by low-income individuals. I think their precise metric is by like miles ridden by low-income people.
Okay.
But the outcome is the same. And in Spin's case, 10% roughly of the miles ridden over the last 6 months were taken by low-income riders enrolled in our Spin Access program. And in return for hitting that performance benchmark, we received a 90% waiver on all permit fees. And so that's great win-win outcome, because we have to make the investment first. We have to deliver the results that they care about. But in return, they waive fees for the next 6 months of the program.
I see.
And so that's another way a subsidy can be effective. And also keep in mind, cities have limited resources. So, we want to be held to a performance standard if we're going to be rewarded them.
And Ian, what do you see when it comes to public monies going toward micromobility? We've seen a number of initiatives, or at least 2 that I can think of. One in Denver, another one in Washington D.C., that creates rebate programs for folks buying e-bikes. What are your thoughts in that area? Should we see more of it? Is that even the right idea?
Well, I think the support and subsidy is always a good help
to improve micromobility because you are promoting people to use more micromobility products. But I think such topic is, again, very far away from a traditional manufacturer point of view. From us, we have been talking to a lot of top-tier customers like Spin and Vail, but they are all they position themselves very well in the market. So they are really close to the policies and all the rebates. However, when we look into a smaller operator, they have a lot of challenges winning tenders at first. And after they win the tenders, they have budgetary issues to support the tender, such as insurance. Often the insurance costs are very high, right, in order to run the operation. So they have to figure out a way to support that insurance first. So from us, we are always trying to help a smaller operator to figure out if we could improve our product a little bit better to reduce the insurance costs. Or how are we going to support them by not hurting maybe the pedestrian? Or how are they going to help change user behavior? Maybe in a way or another, if they can better have a chance to get that policy supports.
Okay.
So we are always looking into that smaller steps.
Makes sense. Yeah. And Gabrielle, at Imnify, how do you guys see this issue?
I mean, I think more and more we see micromobility as like a use case that's very popular. And I think the biggest issues that we see with it is cost and convenience within the cities. So being able to, like, for example, say I'm going out and I'm walking out of a business meeting and I'm in my fields and I see an Uber that's only $7, but I see a scooter that can get me there a lot quicker.
Right.
It's hard for me to say which one I'm going to choose, right? Likely I love riding a scooter, but is that going to be my choice? I don't know. And so I think in our space, we're seeing more and more of it happening within the cities, especially with Go Green movements and support from the public sector. However, in our space, we're here providing the connectivity and we're trying to figure out what data we can give to our customers that will help them improve their product line, kind of like what you were mentioning, to attract the audiences like someone myself who's walking out of a meeting in heels. So that's kind of what we see.
Sure. And Candace, any thoughts here in terms of public support around micromobility? Your company is very involved in universities and that sort of thing. Do you see a lot of partnership with universities, and what does that look like?
So we do have a lot of partnership with university, but we also have a lot of deployment in major cities in US. One thing I want to count on is that there are just so many things on the city's plate right now. Like, the cities has a responsibility to revive public transportation post-COVID. And the public funding is actually very sparse. So in my opinion, it's actually the vendor responsibility to run a profitable and sustainable business model. So for example, at VO, we have been EBITDA profitable since 2020, and we have been making improvement in our EBIT level year over year. So my point is that we have been focused on really partnering with cities with long-term vision to make the program works. And we also very focused on providing users with the vehicle type they love. And the last part is just disciplined execution to make things work. So if an operator is working with a city with reasonable costs, reasonable regulation, and still cannot make it work, I really want to let them to ask a very hard question themselves, like why?
Interesting. Very good. And I want to talk a little bit about transportation systems. We know these don't operate as, micromobility isn't just one thing operating in a city. There's a lot of other systems. There's public transit. So I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about how this one system can work interchangeably and more seamlessly with other transportation systems. I think of transit as the most obvious one, but even TNCs, whether maybe that's a technology question, a software question, a kind of a user platform question, but what do I'd like to get a sense from each of you what you see as the future of the interoperability of micromobility with other transportation systems, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Candace.
Sounds good. I think there are a lot of ways we can do it, like technology integration. But one example I have is that, like, we have been partnering with City of Seattle. with a Department of Energy pilot funding to actually provide discounts for people who actually ride or bike or scoot to transit. So I think that actually helped to improve the percentage of ridership in Seattle using the micromobility with transit and to improve the connectivity there.
Sure.
That is one way.
Yeah, that is a great way to that partnership together. Yeah. Thank you. And Gabrielle, what are your thoughts when it comes to making micromobility a more seamless integration with other forms of transportation?
Mhm. I think that's where we're starting to see smart cities come into play.
Sure.
Where the cities are enabling these different public transit transportation systems to go hand in hand. And I think it all goes into being interconnected as a whole,
Sure.
the city. So aligning with maybe partnering. I don't know what the solution is because I'm not specifically in that micromobility space, but
Okay.
partnering with, say, a company that is in the micromobility space with government transportation officials.
Gotcha.
I don't have a direct answer, but I can say interconnectivity is where it's all at.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's how you get there is going to be interesting. How you get to the integration of the fair payment systems is going to be very interesting. I don't think we've done a real great job of that yet in the United States, but maybe we're getting there. And Yan, what are your thoughts in this area?
Well, I don't really have much experience with public transit.
Sure.
However, I think transit is going to be a very interesting topic to support micromobility. From a manufacturer point of view, I have one customer who's doing car rental,
Okay.
right? So they are using shared e-scooter as a transit rental. So what they do is, let's say you return your rental vehicle to the parking lots, and then you take the e-scooter back to your final destination.
Sure.
And that really improves the micromobility supports.
Absolutely.
And then you can just park that e-scooter elsewhere.
Yeah. The first mile, last mile.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically the last mile topics. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. And Britt, what are your thoughts in this area when it comes to merging micromobility and transit or other forms of transportation?
Yeah, I mean, fair integration is definitely the holy grail and something we should aspire to if we want more people to use both modes and truly connect. In the meantime, a few of the moves that we have made to make sure our service doesn't cannibalize public transit, but more complements it and encourages people to use both modes is to create incentives or rewards if riders will park or end their trip or conversely start their trip near a public transit bus stop or metro. In some cities like DC, also Pittsburgh, we have physical docking stations located right next to a metro stop. So that just, from an infrastructure point of view, makes sense for riders to just move from one mode to the next.
Of course.
And then more on the tech side, the main tools we've used to encourage riders to use both modes is a Google Maps integration, and then also an exclusive integration with Lyft. And so if you open up the Lyft app in about 50 cities in the US,
right.
Instead of taking rideshare, we give riders the option to rent a spin scooter through the Lyft app. And we think that's an important tool because otherwise they would have just hopped in that car.
Sure.
So that's what we're trying to get at with that.
Yeah, I almost think that it's easier to integrate the private entities, the private sector companies together than almost the private sector and public sector companies sometimes, for any number of reasons. But, and I do want to talk a little bit about the riders themselves, the rider demographics, and how those may be changing or not. I think that there's still a lot of data out there that points to that, particularly e-scooters or the domain of white men of a certain revenue bracket and age, and a lot of other folks, particularly underserved communities or less represented. So I would like to hear from you all what you see as rider demographics and how do we expand those demographics. And Britt, I'll start with you because I think this is an area that Spin has given some thought to, a lot of thought, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, definitely to this day, there are still primarily higher income people using our services.
Yeah.
And as you said, a lot of white men using the services. There has been progress made. I think a lot of that comes down to how we implement both our pricing,
Okay.
as far as like equitable low income pricing, and how simple we make that for people to access. Because you can have a low rate, you could have a free rate, right? However, if you have to submit a bunch of forms and it takes like 5 days or a week to enroll you, that's not really beneficial. And so,
And if there's no bike or scooter in your neighborhood, you're probably not going to ride it.
yeah, for sure. So pricing and where we deploy our scooters and bikes makes a huge difference. I will just share one thing that we've experimented a lot over the last year is allowing community partners that are closer to lower income, disadvantaged communities to just do the enrollment on our behalf. And so effectively they vouch for the person and they're enrolled in our system. And so they're on the ground doing, community events every week. And that's like a great way that we can increase enrollment into our low income pricing plans. The other thing is just to eliminate enrollment altogether. And just, if you start your trip in a equity priority area, more disadvantaged area of a city, we'll just give you a 25% or a 50% discount as an added incentive to just get started today and give it a try.
I like that. Trusted partners in a community and working with them.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts in areas like how do we expand riders, expand the number of riders and the types of riders.
Yeah. As a manufacturer, we don't really have demographic data to support the topic. But in order to do more expansion plan, we always focus on 3 general topics. Number 1 is reliability. Is our scooter reliable enough for frequent usage?
Okay.
And secondly, is it comfortability? Is it comfortable to ride? Is suspension good enough? Right? Is it gonna support different road condition? Is it gonna make sure that if it's over speeding or if it's under speeding? So those are the topics we look into. Lastly, is the location. Is it helpful for the warmer area, or is it better in executing in a colder environment?
All right.
Yeah, all different things that we look at.
Yeah.
So those are the things from a manufacturer point of view.
Interesting. Yes. Gabrielle, what are your thoughts when it comes to expanding the base of riders out there, getting more women riding, single moms riding? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I think where it really plays is where we deploy the devices. So like what we were just talking about, and where we come in is, helping these micromobility users deploy wherever. So for example, having these devices have connectivity and coverage in the areas that are typically not being used in. And then from like a demographic perspective, just thinking about myself as, a female rider, someone who loves to do it, but however, it's not always available for me. I think it just comes down to what you had said from a manufacturer standpoint, like, is it comfortable? Is it accessible for me? Is it accessible for those that even might have a disability? So I think there are a lot of questions there, but for around my space, I think it really comes down to the coverage and having it available for you in a specific area. So scaling.
Interesting. Gotcha. Candace, your thoughts in this area?
So our solution to address this challenge is actually to provide a very diverse fleet types with the goal, like, no matter who you are, what age you are, where you want to go, and also regardless of your body size, body type, your gender, and you can always find a vehicle to fulfill your purpose. So for example, 2 years ago, we rolled out our seated scooter Cosmo. The ideas behind it is that it's like lower than the barrier for entry for people who just don't want to use stand-up scooter, and people are more conservative rider and accustomed to like the bike posture, but also the city scooter provide people with a sweat-free experience. So that product really like taken off and become really popular in our programs. And I think it really attracts a lot of underserved community, or like people like women, older generation, and people with disability to get access to micromobility services. So I would say 13% of our users provided feedback that they actually have a sort of disability. and get access to a very diverse vehicle type, especially the city scooter Cosmo, enable them actually can use this affordable alternative transportation of their choice.
Interesting. That's great. I love that. That's pairing the vehicle, the device to the rider. Thank you. I think we're out of time, but this has been a lot of fun, a great conversation. Thank you all. Please join me in thanking our great panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.